All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to yet another live stream from Sports Community. Lockdown in Melbourne, but the world's still good because Richmond's winning. So I'm really pleased to be joined today by radio announcer Brett Phillips. Brett, welcome to Sports Community live stream.
Thank you very much, Steve. Nice to join you.
Oh, it's a bit intimidating interviewing the professionals, so you might just have to help me through this little discussion of ours. So it's US Open's happening today, so you're all over tennis. So how are you following the US Open?
Yeah, I've got to say I'm having withdrawals, to be honest, Steve, because I've been to the last 3 US Opens, and I mean anyone that's been to New York is just a phenomenal city. And then you about 40 minutes out is a bit like the old Waverley Park. You're going to trek a fair way out of the city to get to Flushing Meadows. So I'm trying to be on the New York time zone, but play starts 1 a.m. every day. Melbourne time here. So I have been missing the first few hours, but I've got up to watch the one Aussie today, Jordan Thompson, who had won the first set by the time I sort of tuned in around 4:30. And yeah, I mean, the good part about the US Open is the play goes all the way through to about probably 2 o'clock this afternoon with the day and night session. So yeah, trying to get across all that. The Aussies had a good day yesterday, but yeah, it is strange not seeing any people at a Grand Slam. Fingers crossed we're not going to be in that situation for the Australian Open, that we can get some crowds.
Yeah, well, I vividly remember when COVID shut down, like the Grand Prix was on Friday the 13th, and then I was driving home from the city on Monday the 13th, 14th. So that would have been Monday the 15th of March, and you were stuck in, I think it was Arizona. You're over there to cover the tennis, and then all of a sudden, the world changed, and I think it was the Arizona Open, was it, that got Phoenix Open got shut down?
Indian Wells, yeah, which is not far from Phoenix, about 4 hours drive. But I flew over, and it actually got cancelled while I was in the air. And lucky Qantas doesn't have Wi-Fi, otherwise I would have found out 3 hours into that flight of what about a 13-hour leg to Los Angeles. So yeah, got there, and I was planning to be away for a month. That would have been the start of 20 weeks on the road this year. So sat in LA for a few days. I did get to see the last night of the NBA before that got shut down. Went and saw LeBron play for the Lakers. So I snuck that in, and then had to quickly get a flight home. And I've been home ever since. So yeah, it's turned into a very, very, very different year.
Yeah, it has. It has indeed. But I think out of different and good will come in the long term, and people will look at things differently. And I guess one of the shows that you've got on the SEN network is The First Serve. So do you want to quickly tell us about The First Serve, and then we'll spin the discussion around to community sports clubs and linking in with radio and sponsorship?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, I've been in the broadcasting game a long time now. It's been a while, but it's taken on different guises over the years, and I've always had a passion, certainly for tennis. That might be someone ringing from the US Open. Let's turn that down, Steve. There's radio announcer's mistake, leaving their phone on when they're on air. Done that a couple of times. Yeah, I know. But yeah, look, obviously, I always loved tennis, and there was a niche going at SEN. I mean, when I think now, SEN starting back in 2004, to think that we didn't actually have in a sports mad place like Melbourne a 24/7 sports station where we lived with it for years, without it for years and years. So SEN comes along, which is great. I'd already started doing a little bit of stuff for Tennis Australia, doing some tennis stuff, freelancing. And after a few years, I went to SEN management and I said, well, there's no dedicated tennis show on a 24/7 sports radio station. There was a dedicated golf show from day one that SEN started, Chasing Birdies, which was an institution for a long, long time.
Mark Allen.
So we started The First Serve about 9 or 10 years ago. It's gone into different time slots. And then obviously Croc Media acquiring SEN 2 years ago changed the landscape altogether of how I run The First Serve. It's very different now from the way they commercialised it, and the fact that I now pay the station a fee to broadcast. So it's very, very different. I never thought I'd be at that stage in my broadcasting career. But The First Serve is there to cover the sport from the grassroots to the elite. And this is probably quite appropriate because I love the grassroots. I've been
Yeah.
involved in community sport, as you know, mainly in footy for 19 odd years. But the first serve, anytime we talk domestic grassroots affairs on our show, the spike in our downloads and our listens goes up a huge notch. And that's one thing that I've always been aware of, particularly been involved in local footy, is that people love their local footy club. They love their local tennis club. They love their local soccer club. They might have an interest in the elite and the top flight, and they go to a couple of games at the MCG or Marvel Stadium. But their main passion and where they're invested is their grassroots club. And we've been sort of pricking the needle a little bit the last 3 shows we've done of the first serve because, to be quite frank with you, there's quite a bit of disenchantment with the governing body. And that, look, governing bodies cop their whack in sport. That's you listen to SEN enough all day, and there's plenty of people taking pot shots at the AFL and
Cricket.
Tennis Australia. In tennis case, Cricket Australia has been under the microscope this year, absolutely. So it's really fascinating. It's a bit of a sleeping giant, I think, the grassroots tennis community, who want to see grassroots delivered a lot better. So the first serve's there to cover a bit of everything, grassroots to the elite, covering the Aussies, talking to the international stars when you can get hold of them. They're not the easiest to get hold of tennis players unless you're actually on site and in their face and annoying them. But we're really proud. We're the only dedicated tennis show on commercial radio in Australia. And courtesy of the Croc Media network now, we're sort of expanding to get into different footprints of Australia, and got a website set up. We've got podcasts as well, because 1 hour a week doesn't justify all the tennis news. So we've created themed podcasts, got a team of writers, and we'll see where the next evolution sort of goes.
So you raised a couple of 2 points that I really want to get into, and I'll just, as we're talking, I'll just bring your website up, which is thefirstserve.com.au. But one thing that we now know with digital, whether it's radio, social, email, websites, etc., that there's almost an insatiable appetite for community sport, and clubs don't actually realise that. They see mainstream media as something unobtainable, and so I'd like to explore that. But the other part that I'd like to explore is your concept that, the way when Croc Media came in and the way that you're now paying them, that's actually allowed you to create, you get control of, to some degree, of the sponsorship that comes through your show. And it allows you to create sponsorship. You're seeing now that community sports are taking up and using radio to promote their sponsors. So do you want to talk about that side of it first, and then we'll go into the stories of community sport that would be attractive to radio?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of my deal with SEN, I mean, and I totally understand that, business is business, and no 24-hour sports radio station that is driven revenue-wise by football and AFL, which dominates this town. I totally understand that. No management is going to pay a full-time tennis reporter, tennis commentator, tennis host. Prior to Croc Media starting, I never had to pay overheads, but I could go and on-sell airtime to pay myself. Croc Media came in and said, effectively, we're going to charge you rent for that airtime. So you're sitting there as a broadcaster thinking, well, okay, either I take on the challenge or, you throw your hat on the ground and say, that's not fair. That's just the lie of the land. So I took it on as a challenge. This is my 3rd year into it now. So in a nutshell, yes, I pay a yearly rent every month to Croc Media. I then have rights to go and sell commercial airtime, that 1 hour of airtime. For example, if I was in New York at the US Open this week, I'd be doing programming crosses into all the major programs. So I can go and on-sell all that at the price that I determine. Now, I know what an SEN salesperson would charge, say, a local club or a
sports community.
Absolutely. I know what they would charge, and I can come in significantly under that and make it affordable. And that's what I actually did this year, Steve. I actually had a number of partners due to COVID who went on hold, who said they were about to partner me, and they said, look, Brett, we're closing. We're going to have to just delay things to the end of the year. I had to think outside the square, so I decided to tap back into my footy grassroots as a starting point. And I wrote to every Metropolitan Football League in Melbourne. I wrote to every single club in Melbourne, and I gave them a special price because I've sat in that chair as a president, as a secretary, as a general manager of junior and senior footy clubs, and you're constantly trying to find ways to fundraise, to generate revenue. You know what your main income streams are, and some of them can only be capped at so much. You think, how do we actually boost the coffers here and really make the club more solid? But sponsors-wise, you can only internally at a footy club or any community sporting club, you can only give sponsors sort of so much. So I went in and I said to the clubs, here's an offer to actually put your advertisers, which unfortunately, due to the year we're having, are not getting the exposure they normally would because there's no fans coming and seeing their sign on the fence, or they're advertising on match day, or the usual communications probably aren't happening with the sporting clubs. So give them a little bit of value adding, keep that relationship going, even though they might be on hold with you this year. Sometimes it's nice to give back to the sponsors as well, because I've been in that boat as a general manager and I loved receiving a check from a sponsor, which was relief half the time that you'd bank it, pay the bills, pay the league, pay the council, whatever the case may be. And it's sometimes we're not probably doing enough. We're not servicing those sponsors or giving them something. So I gave it as a price that was extremely affordable, and the clubs, a lot of them thought it was a bit of a no-brainer that we can actually go to our partners and say, hey, we're going to put you on commercial radio. And it's worked really, really well. And I've actually said to some of those clubs, why don't you build this into your sponsorship package as an external source for next year, where you can either value add, or you can profit share. And there's different models you can look at to maximise it. And it was affordable to a lot of companies who never would have contemplated actually advertising on radio, probably thinking in the back of their mind, radio, TV, no, out of our ballpark. Even if we were thinking of it, we probably couldn't afford it. These rates were extremely affordable, and I'm prepared to, as part of my deal, just keep that flat rate for any community sporting club who would want to advertise on radio and actually, expand their message to a bigger audience than just maybe the four walls of their club and the league they're attached to.
Yeah, when we were speaking, Brett, I was astounded at and this is one of the benefits of the changing landscape of, I guess, radio, and you leasing the airtime gives you this flexibility to create these sort of packages for clubs that are genuinely affordable. Like, in some cases measured in hundreds of dollars, and I was really struck by. I mean, we've got no commercial arrangement between you and I. I mean, it was just us going, whoa, I didn't think that was really something that was accessible for clubs. But really, if I was a club, certainly in Melbourne area where you're predominantly, but you off the SEN platform, Croc Media, very much going national now. It was such a good value for money that I thought, well, geez, we've got to talk about this and get that out. So. And just before you come back to that, Brett, there's 7 people online at the moment, so welcome to you. And as always, if you've got any questions for Brett, just put them into the comments, and we'll just we'll just introduce those into the conversation. I'm sure that, I guess, Brett, the question that's going to come through is, give us some ranges of pricing that at the bottom end of things that clubs are accessing at the moment.
Yeah, so the clubs that have jumped on board this year, basically what I said to them, they had to buy a minimum package. So that minimum package was $995. So if you break that down, for a 30-second commercial, $75 was the cost for a 30-second commercial, which I can tell you in radio terms, and I'd be happy to send anyone the SEN rate card. It's cheap as chips. Agree. And just to explain how radio works, obviously, breakfast and drive are your prime shifts where it costs more generally to advertise in those two shows as opposed to mornings, afternoons, and evenings, and weekends for that matter. I had a flat price across the board. So if your commercial got into breakfast or got into drive, that price doesn't change, even though from an SEN sales point of view, it would change.
Yeah.
So there was the option to do 30-second ads, 15-second ads, which are half that price, around $38 for a 15-second ad, and what's called in radio terms credits. So if anyone who listens to SEM will know there's a lot of credits. They're little 10-second lines when, for example, I go on a show and I'm introduced, brought to you by Sports Community. Here's the website, the phone number, a 10-second tagline. And particularly during a US Open, for example, that can be in saturation right across the fortnight because just about every show's using you. So there's different ways of doing it too, because some businesses like to have their message spread out over a few months, and others like a more saturated. They might be, targeting a particular month of the year or a particular time frame where they just want to really ram that message home. But my experience, certainly have been in radio for a long time, is that to probably get some cut through and some traction, you've at least got to do maybe a 3-month campaign. And that doesn't mean you've got to spend thousands and thousands of dollars. It does not mean that at all. But if we're just talking from a club point of view, of clubs here who are listening, I mean, there is one club that I had on board who actually used it for their own benefit. So they ran some ads promoting their super rules for 2021, with this season cancelled, of course. So they used it for their own benefit, and then they had 12 sponsors who they just wanted to thank for their loyal support in 2020 to say, hey, we're just throwing you a couple of ads on radio. Now, those businesses, in all fairness, 2 ads on radio is not probably going to, obviously get, sales upon sales upon sales. You've got to do a lot more advertising in that, but you never know. You might be heard once and people, latch on, or it's funny. A lot of people on radio, I find, will hear a sponsor, maybe not need that service right now, but the ad will stick in their mind that they'll jot it down. For example, our website was done at the first serve by a certain company. I'd been hearing their ads for 6 months on SEN. It was just in my brain all the time. When I went to do a website, they were the first people I thought of. So, radio advertising's it's still, even though digitally everything's changed. I'll talk about the digital side of SEN, which is enormous too. But radio advertising is still a pretty powerful medium because it's there, it's live. People, particularly who listen to SEN, are very rusted on. Sports listeners who don't change the dial, so they're listening to the ads and the programming.
Yeah. So, and I guess for me as an experienced sports administrator, I was still really surprised at the pricing, and I guess that's why I would like just to put it onto the agenda for those that are running the clubs that don't just disregard it. But on the other side of the coin, there's also the content side that I know that clubs just don't recognise the value of their stories and when their stories are relevant to a more broader audience. So what's the sort of story, if we just narrow it down just to tennis, and talk specifically about first serve, what's the sort of stories that your audience would be gravitating to from a community sports club perspective?
Oh, look, I think, people love the human stories, don't they? They do. They absolutely love them. I'm just trying to think back to, a couple of articles we wrote on our website and we highlighted on our show. We actually had them on. They were just, and I said to a couple of our writers, I want you to go and tell me go and find some suburban stars. And we found a 77-year-old lady who's been a legend in pennant and midweek ladies, and she's been playing for a particular club. And we told her story. We brought it to life. And to me, that's as good as telling stories about Ash Barty winning the French Open or being the world number one. I mean, everyone's got a great story. So I think those human stories, the people that you can bring to life who are the unsung heroes of your club. I mean, I've been at Clubland.
Yeah.
I used to gravitate to the people who didn't want to be thanked, who just selfless every week, there from start of the day to the end of the day, And people love those sort of human stories. So I think
Yeah.
they're great ones to share. And I mean, like, if you listen to SEN enough, like I do, you'll often hear those sort of grassroots stories being told by people out, driving around, because that's often where the sports conversation gravitates to quite a bit across the jet.
Absolutely. And 9 times out of 10, I'd suggest those stories are on air because someone has proactively told an announcer or told a producer or told the station of the story. They're not necessarily people going out and looking for grassroots, the Paul Amy's of the world are the exception, but clubs should be encouraged. Oh, no, let me rephrase that. Would you encourage clubs where they've got those stories, those human interest stories, particularly those historical milestones, the stories, the historic stories, etc., to send those through to mainstream media, whether it be TV, radio, and newspaper, and see what happens with that?
No doubt. If I put my media hat on, and when I did the exercise of contacting all the clubs, it was quite an exercise to find the best contacts. So I'm going through, 8 or 9 senior leagues, and there was the Yarra Junior Footy League, South Metro Juniors. So there's a lot of clubs amongst that. So you're looking at everyone's shop front, which is their website, and it varies across all the different clubs. But when I see that a club has a sort of a communications coordinator or something of that description, then I think that club's, I think it's one of the most important pieces now. If I was coming back as a president or managing a club, and I haven't done it for the last 4 or 5 years, that would be one of my first appointments, because to get your shop front right, to get your story right, to look good on social media, to tell people externally, like, there's ways to get to key people at all the major newspapers, the radio stations, local clubs putting out their own media releases to just create a database of so many contacts. And you never know, someone might just pick it up or mention it in mainstream radio. It might drift into a newspaper. So I think that's one role in a footy club that, if you can find, and they're not always easy to find, and but someone who's really savvy at social media, your comms and the way it looks like, and then being able to tell those stories. I think that's great for local clubs to get on the front foot with that sort of stuff. And I've found that since we started a tennis show, I get a lot of correspondence. Hey, we're doing this at our club. Could you give it a mention or interview this person? And 9 times out of 10, I've found a way to, include it on our show, because that's as important as covering the elite stuff.
And you're absolutely right about the comms side of it. When we're setting up, and people will be surprised by this, when we set up working with typically councils to set up new clubs, the first group that you kind of set up is that small committee, that formation. But on the same day that we set that up, we're trying to set up the comms team, because yes, people will be interested in the, hey, we've got a club now that you can kick a soccer ball or hit a tennis, but it's the story to create it that really creates the momentum, and that you can get people buying into the story. And that's one of the things. And again, until this whole social media, digital analytics came about, we just didn't realize the insatiable appetite the community has for information about our community sports clubs. We just thought it was people inside the 4 walls that cared. And I guess that's what you're seeing in the Croc Media social kind of stats as well coming through. Yeah,
it's another world. It's blown me away, to be honest. Since Croc took over SEN, so because of the position I'm in, always needing the updated information for my partners, I'm always on to Croc every month. What are the latest digital numbers? So I can monitor our own. So our show is a live radio show, but it also is in podcast form, because so many people miss live radio. And it blows you away where your audience is. And so we're now over 100,000 listens to our podcast. That's not only our live show, it's all our other podcasts. So every bit of content that we put up through our podcast platform. social media now and the way you use it. And I'm not the absolute champion at social media. I've got others who are probably more passionate about that and do it in a much more savvy way. But yeah, the way people are consuming things now has changed. And if you look at Croc Media, the biggest thing that SEN ram home all the time is download the SEN app.
Yeah, that's how I like it.
Yeah, because it gives you choice. It's like going to the remote control and you can watch this or watch that or watch this. This is what Croc is now. If you don't like what's on the mainstream station, or you can flick across and listen to SEN track, or you can listen to one of SEN stations interstate. You can go on the app and catch up to interviews that you miss. Everything is there. Their digital team is full on it 24/7, pretty much.
Yeah.
So that's how I've also incorporated partners in. It's taken a bit of time to actually educate the partners that it's not all about the live radio.
Yeah.
Live radio's, the billboard. I saw the ad on the billboard. Oh, I just heard it on the radio. Then I'm hearing it on this thing, and it starts to all sort of combine together. And if you can get the combination of all that right, then your message starts to give it a cut through. So we're attaching a lot of our partners now onto the top and tail of podcasts. Using our social media. So when I go to partners, it's with a multimedia approach.
Yeah.
To say maybe your business is the way it's set up might get more traction doing more social than live radio, for example. So it can be a combination of all of that is getting to so many different ears and eyeballs.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I guess we've spoken about SEN and Croc Media today, Brett, because that's your home and that's where you live and that's where we hear you each week, whether it's through the SEN app or through the radio. But it applies to every radio station and particularly rural and regional radio stations that are continually looking for content. So from my perspective, again, talking with you, it really opened my eyes to radio as a genuine vehicle for clubs to promote themselves, promote their stories, and to really promote their sponsors. And I think through COVID, sponsors are doing it harder than just about anybody. Through COVID, if someone, what the sponsors are going to remember is those acts of kindness, those unsolicited acts of kindness. And for the club to come on and say, hey, we just want to reach out to our sponsors, say thank you. If you can help them, but we want to let them know that we're kind of with them on the journey. I think that's a powerful thing to do in a cost-effective way that for years to come is going to build loyalty between that club and that sponsor.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'd be more than happy to speak to anyone that just wants to inquire, just to find out a bit more information as to how it works. But yeah, I think there's different ways of looking at it. As I said, this year being a COVID year, for some clubs it made some real sense just to give their partners some exposure, and it didn't cost them an arm and a leg. And then the other ones are thinking, well, hang on, maybe we can build this into our sponsorship prospectus each year that we put out. That here's an external little add-on. Maybe you can sort of bury that price within your own sponsorship prices, or you add it on, or there's different ways of doing that.
Yeah.
Or when you're setting your budgets every year, you just allocate a little bit of extra funds for your partners, and then how best to utilise that. So, and also, a great opportunity just to promote your club as well, because the great mystery of radio. Well, maybe not the mystery, but it always surprises you who's listening to radio. It's been surprising me for 20-odd years. The people who I least expect at times to be listening are listening. So you just never know. You might get some traction, and it's not going to break the bank balance.
Exactly. Well, Brett, thank you very much. How do people reach out to you and get in touch with you if they want to find out more?
Yeah, look, I'm happy to certainly handle my email across, and Steve, you can pump it out wherever you like. So just
we'll put it in the comments. Yep.
Brett, BRETT at bapcom.com.au. So flick me an email, and I'm more than happy to chat.
Okay, so we've just put that straight into the comments. So Brett's email is there in the comments of this post. So Brett, thank you very much. I know you've been up early and you've got another long day of tennis. My wife would suggest that's not necessarily a hard day's work. She does to me repeatedly, but That's one of the mysteries of life that we should probably go into at another stage. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience about radio with us today.
Yeah, pleasure, Steve. Doing a great job. I love the grassroots, and to everyone who's involved at their clubs or in grassroots sport, my hat's off to you. It's rewarding, it's consuming, but hopefully more ups and downs.
Yeah, exactly. So we're drawing to the end of another week. So tomorrow, as normal, we've got eSport Friday with Sports Community's eSport guru, Cameron Osterland. I have no idea what we're talking about. I have no idea what he's talking about, but it's always a very, very, very interesting journey to see what we can learn from this growing behemoth that is esports. And there's just so much that we can learn from esports, bring back to traditional sports, particularly in the way that we build audiences, engage audiences, and entertain audiences. So until tomorrow, I'm Steve Pallas. Brett Phillips, thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for being part of our sports community.